In June 1973, under the hot lights of the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, more than 12,000 fans pressed shoulder to shoulder. The king was in full command until a single voice called out from the dark. What happened next would silence the arena, capture cameras, and ripple worldwide as one of Elvis's most human moments. The Mid-South Coliseum was alive with electricity on June 10, 1973. More than 12,000 fans packed the circular arena, their voices a constant hum, rising and falling like the tide. The smell of hot dogs and buttered popcorn clung to the air, mingling with the faint whir of overhead fans that barely cut the summer heat. The lights dimmed. A low roar surged from the crowd, followed by the first blinding beam of the spotlight. Then an eruption. Elvis Presley appeared, dressed in a gleaming white jumpsuit trimmed with gold embroidery, the sequins on his chest catching the light like shards of glass. The sound of CC Rider tore from the band, brass and guitars pushing against the roar of 12,000 clapping hands. The king leaned into the microphone, the rich baritone voice filling every corner of the Colosseum. For a moment, the audience forgot their own breathing. He was larger than life, and yet so close they swore they could touch him. Scarves already hung from his neck, ready for the eager hands reaching forward. Security men, including Chief Bill Burkett, scanned the aisles nervously, used to fans rushing the stage for just a touch, a token, a memory. Every song landed like a thunderclap. Women screamed, teenagers waved, crude signs scrawled with lipstick, and cameras flashed in bursts of light that bounced off his jeweled belt. The stomping of feet on concrete echoed like drums, reverberating through the circular arena. It was spectacle. It was theater. It was worship, and yet, amid the noise, something else lingered. Elvis, though smiling, appeared slightly weary. Between songs, sweat dripped down his temples, staining the white collar. He tilted his head, listening, not just to the wall of sound, but to the pockets of silence between. Could he hear more than the music? Could he sense more than applause? Halfway through I got a woman. A hush briefly settled as he paused to toss a scarf into the crowd. The fabric sailed like a dove, caught by trembling hands in the second row. The woman clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. That reaction, multiplied by thousands, was the heartbeat of the night, and yet unnoticed by most eyes from Section D, stared harder than the rest. A boy sat in a wheelchair, his mother's arm draped gently across his shoulder. His lips moved, but his voice was swallowed by the crashing instruments. He strained forward, eager, desperate for something more than distance. The concert thundered on, but then one sound pierced through the music. The arena would never forget what followed. As the final chord of "You Don't Have to Say You Love Me" rang out, the Colosseum erupted once more. The king tilted his head, offered a crooked smile, and reached for another scarf. Fans reached upward like branches, stretching to the light. For most, this was pure spectacle. But then everything shifted. A woman's trembling voice cracked through the thunder. "He can't see you." The words were fragile, yet somehow sharper than the music. For a moment, the band played on, horns blaring, guitars snapping like firecrackers. But Elvis froze. His microphone lowered an inch. His eyes, shadowed by heavy lashes, darted toward the middle rows. Section D. There, under the dim halo of the sidelights, a young man sat in a wheelchair. He was maybe 16, thin and pale, his hair neatly combed by loving hands. His head tilted slightly, the way those with failing vision sometimes do. His mother sat beside him, clutching his wrist. Her lips moved in prayer, as if the plea she had shouted might vanish into the rafters if she let go. The noise of 12,000 bodies pressed inward. Some craned their necks to see. Others whispered impatiently, uncertain what was happening. Security shifted uneasily, Bill Burkett already lifting his radio, scanning for orders. Should they silence the disruption? Should the concert continue untouched? And then it happened. The band stumbled into silence, one instrument at a time, like dominoes falling. Brass, then guitar, then drums. The arena went dead silent. 12,000 pairs of eyes turned toward one corner. Elvis did not speak. He simply stared, shoulders rising and falling, white fabric shimmering in the spotlight. In that silence, a tension deeper than any lyric filled the room. Would he carry on, pretending not to hear? Or would he step into the cry, risking the carefully choreographed spectacle for a single voice? Have you ever been in a crowd that suddenly holds its breath, where thousands, in unison, lean toward a choice one man must make? The mother's voice cracked again, softer this time. "He can't see you, Elvis." The boy's lips moved, though his words were lost to the distance. His hand lifted slightly, searching for a shape, a sound, a connection. The spotlight, almost instinctively, swung across the Colosseum and fixed upon them. The audience gasped. And in that moment, the king and the boy were bound by silence. What would he do next? The Colosseum had never felt so divided, half caught in awe, half in restless confusion. The silence hung heavier than the smoke drifting from paper cups of burning matches in the cheap seats. 12,000 people, pressed shoulder to shoulder, waited for direction. Security Chief Bill Burkett stepped closer to the stage edge, his jaw tight. His men were trained for chaos, not compassion. He signaled toward Section D, as if to hush the disruption. But the mother clutched her son's arm tighter, refusing to shrink from the spotlight. Her plea had already broken through the music once. Would it be smothered now? Elvis stood perfectly still. Sweat rolled down his temple, catching in the light like a falling star. His grip on the microphone slackened, the long black cord coiling near his boots. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing in from all sides. The show must go on. The rhythm must not falter. But how could he ignore that trembling hand reaching toward nothing? Some in the crowd shifted impatiently, murmuring, "Come on, Elvis." Others clasped their hands to their mouths, sensing something larger than a concert was unfolding. The divide was sharp between those who wanted the performance to stay pristine, and those who longed for him to act. Isn't it strange how a crowd can turn, one heartbeat away from either frustration or reverence? Burkett leaned in, muttering, "We can escort them out, sir. Keep the show smooth." His words were drowned in whispers and coughs, yet Elvis heard them clear as day. He didn't answer. Instead, he studied the boy. The teenager tilted his head upward, listening harder than anyone in the arena. His face lit by a single golden beam. The hush deepened. The sound crew exchanged glances, their fingers hovering over switches. The TCB band sat frozen, horns drooping at their sides, sticks resting on silent drums. Even the clinking of ice in plastic cups ceased. Then Elvis took a step forward, one step toward the edge. The murmur rose. A woman gasped audibly. Someone shouted, "Go on, Elvis." Another hissed, "Don't stop the music." The divide had grown louder than the music itself. For a moment, it seemed the king might retreat, pulling the microphone back to his lips to reset the night. But his eyes never left the boy. and with each second that passed, the stakes grew heavier. Would he risk derailing the show for one stranger's cry? Would 12,000 understand, or would they turn? The answer was seconds away. The crowd leaned in. The arena went dead silent again, and the choice hovered in the spotlight. Then it happened. Elvis raised his hand, palm open toward the band. The music stopped cold. The mic crackled as it lowered to his side. For the first time all night, the king was not a performer. He was a man deciding in front of 12,000 witnesses. Bring him closer. The words, soft yet commanding, carried across the Colosseum. Security froze. Bill Burkett frowned, caught between duty and disbelief. The order had been clear. Still, the men hesitated, unsure if allowing such a break in protocol might invite chaos. Bring him closer, Elvis repeated. This time sharper. Two guards moved reluctantly toward. Section D, the crowd parted in ripples as the boy's wheelchair was gently maneuvered forward. His mother whispered encouragement, brushing his hair with trembling fingers. The boy's hand fluttered upward again, blind yet searching, as if he knew something monumental was about to touch him. Elvis stepped down from the riser, his boots thudding softly on the wooden stage floor. Each step echoed in the silence. Fans watched wide-eyed, holding their breath, afraid to break the spell. The microphone cord slithered behind him like a tail, forgotten. At the edge of the stage, Elvis crouched. His jewel-studded belt caught the spotlight, scattering flecks of gold across the boy's pale face. For a moment, the king and the teenager existed in a private world, 1,000 others invisible. Swallowed by the hush, Elvis reached into the crook of his neck, pulled free a deep blue scarf, and pressed it gently into the boy's palm. The teenager's fingers tightened around it, clutching as if he had been handed the moon. His lips trembled, forming silent words. His mother sobbed openly, her shoulders shaking as she bent to kiss her son's temple. The arena gasped as one. What do you think mattered more in that instant? The perfection of a performance, or the imperfection of love offered in its place? Elvis bent closer, whispering words only the boy and his mother could hear. He brushed a hand across the boy's shoulder, then rose, eyes glistening in the light. No lyric, no melody could compete with the sound of compassion echoing in that silence. And then without warning, the king lifted the microphone again. The band scrambled back to readiness. He gave a single nod. The first notes of Love Me Tender rang out, softer than before, as if the entire Colosseum had shrunk into one intimate room. The audience erupted, tears and applause colliding, the sounds swelling until the rafters shook. But the boy kept clutching the scarf, and Elvis kept his eyes fixed on him as he began to sing. The first notes of Love Me Tender drifted into the hush like a prayer. Elvis's voice, softer now, wrapped around the boy in Section D, as though every lyric belonged only to him. The microphone trembled slightly in the king's hand, not from nerves, but from the sheer gravity of the moment he had chosen to carry. The band followed his lead, easing into the melody with tenderness. No blaring horns, no show-stopping percussion, only a quiet guitar, a sigh of strings, and Elvis's baritone cradling the song. For 12,000 people, the concert had dissolved into something different. It was no longer about set lists or encores. It was about connection. Strangers turned toward one another, eyes wet, their hearts sinking to the same rhythm. Mothers hugged daughters. Husbands slipped arms around wives. Fans who had once screamed for scarves now pressed hands to their chests. reverent in silence. Isn't it extraordinary how compassion, once revealed, spreads like fire in dry grass, consuming not with destruction, but with light? Elvis sang directly to the boy, his gaze fixed, his words carrying across the arena like a benediction. Each phrase seemed to dissolve the distance between stage and seat. The boy gripped the blue scarf as though it tethered him to a world he had once only imagined. His mother wept openly, no longer trying to contain her emotion. Applause broke in waves between verses, thunder rolling, then ebbing, only to rise again. Some fans raised lighters, tiny flames flickering like stars in the vast arena. Others clasped hands in prayer, whispering gratitude for what they were witnessing. The Colosseum, once a cavern of noise, had transformed into a single, unified voice, thousands leaning not toward spectacle, but toward empathy. That unity was palpable, pressing down like warm air after a summer storm. When the final line fell, Elvis let the silence linger. For 5 long seconds, no one moved. The song was complete, but the meaning was still reverberating. Then an eruption. The crowd leapt to its feet, a roar swelling so loud it rattled the steel beams above. That night, a concert became communion in the days that followed. Whispers of the Mid-South Coliseum moment spread faster than any chart single. Fans carried the story back to neighborhoods and workplaces, retelling it with trembling voices. How Elvis stopped everything for one boy who couldn't see him. Soon, bootleg tapes circulated, grainy recordings where you could hear the hush, the gasp, and the ovation. Local papers picked it up first. On June 15, 1973, the Memphis Presimeter ran a small headline: Elvis pauses for fan. The photograph showed a white-suited figure leaning from the stage, a blue scarf caught in a boy's clenched hand. For those who hadn't been there, it was proof that the story was real. For those who had, it was an artifact of memory. Years later, the footage resurfaced in documentaries and tribute specials. The images were imperfect, shaky film, muffled audio, but that imperfection made the compassion more authentic. In Europe, in Japan, in small towns across America, fans wept while watching a moment that transcended language. At Graceland, the scarf itself was eventually catalogued. Tucked in a glass case, its fabric still faintly carried the scent of cologne and sweat. Visitors paused before it, not just to honor Elvis the star, but Elvis the man who chose humanity over spectacle. Sometimes legends are remembered for their highest notes. This time, Elvis was remembered for silence, the silence before he gave, and the silence after the crowd went dead still. That silence changed forever how millions saw him. The viral wave had begun long before the word viral existed. When people recall Elvis Presley's Mid-South Coliseum performance of June 1973, they rarely list the full set list or count the number of scarves he gave away. They remember the pause. They remember the silence. And they remember the choice. Greatness, in that moment, wasn't measured by volume or spectacle. It wasn't about how high a note could soar or how bright the sequins could shine. It was measured in how one man, standing before 12,000, heard a single cry and responded with compassion. The boy in Section D may not have seen the king's glittering jumpsuit or the flash of the spotlight, but he felt the warmth of a hand, the press of fabric, the weight of being noticed. His mother's tears told the rest of the story. Isn't it true that the memories which last longest are often born not of perfection, but of kindness? Elvis had faced a choice that could have split the night in two: continue the show untouched, or risk breaking rhythm for love. He chose humanity, and because of that choice, 12,000 strangers witnessed something larger than music. They witnessed a king kneeling for his people. The legacy of that night isn't bound by bootlegs, clippings, or museum glass. It lives in every fan who retells the story, in every mother who hopes her child will be seen, in every crowd that remembers the hush before the ovation when the arena went dead silent. Elvis Presley showed us that sometimes the most legendary notes are the ones left unsung. When a single moment of compassion can silence 12,000 people and echo for 50 years, it deserves to be remembered. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness shapes legacies, and tell us what's the moment you'll never forget witnessing.